Okay, I am not with it today. I just gave a whole big lecture and didn't hit the record button. Okay, so this is about incorporation, which is the argument basically that the book is about the body, Joe's body specifically, but everybody's body, and especially now. I mean, now that in America and to a lesser extent in Canada, women can be drafted right into the front line. Um, yeah, expect to be included. So, which means that your children will be included. That's the thing about opening the door to this kind of thing is that you can't shut it again. Anyway, so Joe says on page 110, there are plenty of laws to protect guys' money even in wartime, but there's nothing on the book says a man's life is his own. And this speaks to an idea that will be explored in greater detail by French military theorist Paul Virilio. Virilio talks about people being born already drafted. And this is an old argument that basically, and this one that Foucault really brings into the public eye, that essentially the individual's life is never their own because they're born into a state like the ones that we have, so that you can never get clear, or only with great diligence and probably a lot of money can you get clear. And if you have a lot of money, then you're probably not clear anyway. So yeah. And so the example that Trumbo gives is that Joe thinks about is the Carthaginians. And he tells this story on 182. There they chained one arm and one leg to the door, and one arm and one leg to the wall, so that for anyone to enter, the seal would have to be broken, and the seal was a living, breathing body of a man. So this is page 182. So if you want to go to war, you have to cut through a human body, a living human body. And I'm in favor of that. I think that you take one of these soldiers who's a true believer, who says, I'll die for my country. It's like, okay, let's test that. And put them in front of one of these armories. Put them over one of these big vault doors. And before you go to war, George Bush, I think, should have had to go, and they would have given him, like a clutch knife, a standard knife that the soldiers are given, and he would have to kill a person, and ideally one of his own daughters, because his daughters were never going to go to war. They were never even going to join. So it's like, well, let's have that. And this is something which a number of you are familiar with from a story that I use in another course. The story is called Iphigenia by Nancy Collins, I think it is. I think it's Nancy Collins. Might be Helen Collins. I think it's Nancy Collins. Sorry about this. And where basically the girl, there's a little 8 to 10-year-old girl who follows the president around, and she has the nuclear launch codes. And to get the launch codes, the president has to kill her. So I was like, well, that's not such a bad idea. I mean, it may very well be that this is going to bring some sobriety, to quote from the retired admiral. These weapons were intended to bring sobriety into the enemy's eyes. It's like, well, how about let's have some sobriety in the user's eyes, the people who want to make war. I would have been interested to see whether Bush would have had what it took, whatever that is. I mean, he's an amoral guy. It's like, okay, so if he's amoral, like, can he kill one of his own daughters? Let's see. Let's do it, and he has to do it. Not some. You don't give it to some guard or something like that. And then Dick Cheney can kill one of his own daughters too. Let's see if he could do that. These people who are going to make literally billions of dollars. I mean, Cheney made literally billions of dollars because of the war. It's like, before you go and make your billions of dollars, sacrifice your kid. Let's see you do it. Because basically, that's what you're doing with other people's kids. You've already sacrificed them. They've been born sacrificed. And that's what Trumbo is saying. Now, this model is pointed out to some extent, to a great extent, actually, I think, by Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, sometimes considered to be the first political scientist in the English language anyway, in his book Leviathan. And Leviathan is, here I'll show you the frontispiece for Leviathan. Have a look at this thing. And what you'll see in the frontispiece here is a structure of forces. Let me put it away for a second and go back to this. This is a famous image. The image that you really need to see is that, or the first that you need to see is that the king's body is made up of a bunch of little people, and those people are the civitas, the body politic. And Hobbes has this mechanistic model of what human life is, and he's basically sort of says it looks like human life is a mechanism. And then he's going to go on to make an allegory, and he's going to say that the state is like a prince, but it's actually more like this huge body. Leviathan is not understood. It's not understood what Leviathan is. He's a huge sea creature. It's a he. Appears in Job in the Bible, but that's it. You don't actually get a description. Everybody assumed it's a whale. It's like, no, just because the whale is the biggest creature in the ocean, basically, as far as we know, except for the great white squid that appears in Moby Dick. But there are these sort of fantastical, like the Kraken, that kind of thing. So it's this enormous being, which God is so astonishingly powerful that he brings forth this thing out of the deep. That's the idea. And so in Hobbes' mind, Leviathan is the state, the commonwealth, or in Latin, civitas, as he says, which he says, but it is but an artificial man. I'm actually quoting from Leviathan here, in which the sovereignty is an artificial soul as giving life and motion to the whole body. So it's an idea. And at the head is the king, and then the people make up the body, and so they fill up the body. And then he's got, the magistrates and other officers of the judiciary and execution, artificial joints. And so he goes on to sort of play out this allegory. Let's have another look at the frontispiece here, and I'll talk about it a bit. Okay. I'm not. Nothing pleases me more than the return of the COVID non-haircut. Jeez. Okay, I'm not completely sure why I didn't get at the Hobbes frontispiece, but I'll just do a couple of minutes now. What you're looking at here then is the piece that came in front of the printed book, which is huge. And on the left side, you will see what I have labeled the civil part of the world, and on the right side, the ecclesiastical. Okay, so this is now let's zoom in on the civil stuff. The civil stuff basically looks like a chess game, which is a war game, right? Chess is one of the key games that was used to train in strategic people, boys in strategic thought. And so chess is very important. And fundamentally, a chessboard is a class system, right? It has a king who has to be protected. I mean, the king is very important, but is largely symbolic, and has no more strength than a pawn has. That's not quite true. The king can move backward and protects all the spaces around him, but otherwise is not very strong. But has to be protected. So the king is almost a liability. But without a king, no game, right? So, and the queen, and who has the greatest amount of power, which is an interesting commentary on the creation of the game, and then the knights, of course, who are the cavalry, and the landed class, who have enough money to and are expected to buy horses and become the cavalry. I mean, this is the elite, right? This is armor, basically, and they're going to wear physical armor. The bishops, who are the religious aspect, basically, of the court, and the pawns, who are the soldiers, infantry. They are expendable. There are the most of them. They are interchangeable. They're fungible, basically. And the two rooks, and the rooks also called castles sometimes because they look like little castles, right? So if we look again at this civil side, you'll see, the first thing is a castle. Oh, how about that? So it's like this is part of the chess game. And then what do we get? The crown, right? So the king, and then a cannon. So this is part of the force of the rook, is that it can clear out a whole line. As basically as empty as the line is on a chessboard, the rook commands it all. Only in straight lines, right? And then we have all the assumptive arms. So we've got what would have then been muskets, and the drums, so everything you need basically to go to war and to mass an army. The flags, which are very important. And at the very bottom, there's a war, right? It's a war game. Okay, that's the civil stuff. Okay, so then moving over, so what do you need, in other words, to run a government? You need that. And then on the other side is all ecclesiastical, or it's all ecclesiastic, which means it's the church, right? So although there's only one bishop, two bishops, there's a black bishop and a white bishop, right, on the board in a chess game. Here, the whole side of the kingdom is given over to the church, and that's very accurate. I mean, it's just, in some cases the kingdom is completely owned by the church. You know, the king really can't do anything without the backing of the church because the church has the money. Okay, so the first thing we see is the church. That's it, and then we see the bishop's mitre, which is this hat, and this is why the bishop in a chess game has this curious cut basically in the dome because it's the bishop's mitre. That's and everybody understood that. I mean, everybody got this at the time, would have understood what this meant. Then you have what I've always assumed to be the force of God. Now I haven't looked this thing up, but I'm assuming that this is supposed to be the power of spiritual power. And then we have the various arms of the church. And there are arms of the church. I mean, not just the Swiss guards, who decided to protect the Pope, but the church also has armies, and they may be the best armies because it can buy them. So okay, and then at the bottom, the Inquisition or the Papal Court, and this is where power is really made. Okay, so this is what I wanted you to see, and I want you to reflect on the way that this connects to little tiny Joe Bonham, who basically is a nobody in this force. I mean, he would appear on the civil side at the very bottom of the frame, in the back where you can see all the massed infantry with the pikes, the pikemen, because that's who this guy is. Nothing, right? And the question that Joe has not thought about, and I think that most people don't think about, and why would you? It's not exactly the kind of thing you wander around thinking, oh yeah, I realize I'm already drafted. I'm an already drafted member of the state. Is that you've been taken already. You've already been. Now Joe realizes too late that he was already essentially spoken for.